Welcome back to the SENWA studio. 0487 736 736. That is the Harvey Norman Busselton text line. Lots of text coming through on Fremantle in particular, a couple on West Coast as well. Someone who's joined us on the Barretton.a open line on 13 12 55 is Daryl from Kingsley. He's a regular on the show. Daryl, welcome.
Good morning, Duff. Terribly disappointed after the weekend. It was one of those performances that I think I agree with what Jordan Lewis said post-game, where he said those are the types of game that kill coaches' careers. So there was just absolutely no winners, and I think the excuses are over now for Freo fans. It's time to see some selection integrity and time to swing the axe on players that have reputations that are absolutely not been performing through this the first 8 rounds. Like, I can guarantee you there'll be some sort of response definitely against Collingwood, but they're not the games that we're so worried about. It's these games against these middle-of-the-road teams or these teams that are lower that are expected to win games that they just come up and fail the test time and time again.
Yep, there's how well you can play and there's how often you can play well. And right now, Freo aren't playing well often enough. I think that is clear. And that's probably been the case since 2022. They still have strong performances. They're just interspersed with these poor performances and occasionally these, as they like to refer to them, these Docker shockers that happen from time to time. And I think there's a great sense of frustration amongst the Freo faithful, and certainly that was reflected in the number of text messages I received as the game unfolded on Friday night. I might get 2 or 3 normally, depending on whether they're playing well or not. I reckon I had about 15 from frustrated people who basically were saying pretty much the same thing, that they've had enough of this. And I think the club needs to be mindful. And the club, I'm not suggesting that Justin Longmuir gets sacked this week or anything, but they need to understand he has to play finals this year and there has to be measured and sustained improvement both individually and collectively, and it has to start from now because it hasn't happened since 2022. Thanks for your call, Daryl.
Thanks, Stuff.
Scotty Cummings, let's switch to West Coast. Of course, they had a strong performance for half a game against Melbourne, then they fell away to lose by 32 points before the end of the game. Dominated by Max Gawn, as a lot of clubs are, but certainly the 2 WA clubs have had a very bitter taste of Max over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Scotty joins us to talk about it as a Monday expert on that game. Welcome, Scotty.
Morning, mate. It was the Max Gawn show after half-time, wasn't it? I don't think he was in the top 10 possessions in the first half, and by three-quarter time he was leading by 4 or 5. Just absolutely obliterated Matt Flynn in that second half, and then that midfield went to work as well. Minus 23 in clearances, that said it all. And then the times that they did get it into their forward 50, they laid 5 tackles in the forward 50 for their game. So the times that went in, it just bounced straight back out again, and then the back line was under enormous pressure. It was really disappointing after a first half that suggested they could match it with them, and obviously got in front as well and kicked the first goal after three-quarter time, and then after half-time, and then just to be absolutely dominated in the middle of the ground with no answers was really disappointing.
So what do you do if you're Minnie McWalter with the rucks? He's tried Matt Flynn there in round 1. He got smashed by the Gold Coast Suns. He's gone back to Bailey Williams, then he's gone back to Matt Flynn. Matt Flynn competes really strongly, but he looks outgunned in a lot of contests. He was certainly beaten by Lloyd Meek in the game at Marvel Stadium the previous week, and then obviously Max Gawn is one of the greatest ruckmen in the history of the game, and he played accordingly. So if you're Andrew McWalter, who is your number 1 ruckman heading into the clash against Richmond this week?
I think it's a horses for courses. I think, Bailey Williams is just a competitor. He's not quite up to it as far as a ruckman goes, but he competes. And that's one thing when you're in a battling team, that you need people who compete, and that's what he does. He needs to, if I'm Bailey Williams, I'm working a lot more on my forward work than anything else in my marking, because he gets his hands to a lot of footy, but he doesn't take the marks. And so he can get himself to the contest, he can get himself up in the air, but he doesn't hang on to grab. So that would be the only thing I'm working on if I'm Bailey Williams. Where Matt Flynn, I think he competed pretty well in that first half against Max Gawn. I thought he was okay. I think he broke it even. Like, he didn't win a lot of contests, but he halved them. And if that's all you can do, that's fine. But as long as you halve them and you're not losing, that's okay. But then in that second half, it looked like he just didn't have anything to go with him. So whether it's the fitness issue or whether he hasn't been able to put enough work in the off season to get himself to run out games, that's the issue. I mean, ideally. You're trying to, and Archer Reid is the other one. Archer Reid is, obviously big, tall. He's going to be a tall forward. He's probably a ruckman forward, but he's developing really well in that forward piece, and I really like the way he's coming along. And fortunately, it looked like I was adamant that he tore his Achilles on the weekend, Duff, and ran with it before the diagnosis. But when a bloke falls over when he's just standing on his own and clutches the back of his foot, you're pretty safe to say it's an Achilles, but geez, he's tough because he came back on.
Yeah.
But they don't. But yeah, the ruckman piece is a bit of a concern. But let's keep in mind, as you said there, as we described Max Gawn as possibly one of the greatest ruckmen of all time. To lose to him, is it that alarming? You're probably looking at the fact that your midfielders who know when you're up against a dominant ruckman, you're going to be looking at what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And they just let Melbourne's midfielders walk out of contests. They let them walk out of their forward 50. Their stoppage clearances were dreadful. I think they lost that by 15. So not all the responsibility, I guess, goes to Matt Flynn, as you said, against one of the all-time greats. Some of the responsibility has to go to your midfield. And Tim Kelly, I think, had 14. I think he got 3 or 4 of those late in the game. Harley Reid had 13 or 14. They just had too many of their midfield not getting their hands on the footy. Liam Ryan had 10 possessions for the game. He's got to be thrown in there at some stage. He's shown that he can do that. Jamie Cripps had 11 for the day. Just lets too many people run off him, Jamie Cripps, and that's why Melbourne I think they're ranked 3rd or 4th in the competition for rebound defensive 50 to inside forward 50. And most of their attacks came from there because their half forwards of the Eagles, Cripps, Ryan, the like, and always just let their players run, and then they can link up with handball. So there's lots of reasons why this happened, but they're the same reasons. They're always the same reasons with West Coast. No defensive side, when there's a turnover, no one prepared to really gut run and do the hard things that maybe people don't notice, but it stops the opposition from being so destructive.
Oscar Allen in defence looked like he had one of his better games for the season. How did you see him, and do you keep him there?
Yeah, you keep him there. I didn't mind him. He looks so bereft of confidence because he drops marks that he normally takes. He dropped probably 2 or 3 chest marks, a couple of high grabs that he normally takes, but then he took a couple as well. I thought he competed really hard. I reckon he was robbed on about 4 or 5 occasions where he was mugged. I thought it was probably 4 or 5 times that he could have had a free kick given to him, should have had a free kick given to him and didn't. You do that, you give him those kicks, and all of a sudden he's really powerful and strong down there and a bit of a wall. And so I thought he was really unlucky in a lot of instances, but no, I thought he competed really hard. The marks will come. He'll get his confidence there at some stage, and I think you got to leave him there, mate.
That leads into another question. You're talking about the getting mugged in marking contests. The McGovern-Melksham incident, give us your thoughts. Excuse me. And also players just getting shunted into marking contests. I think it's happening more and more, and I get the feeling it's happened as a result of the changing of the hands in the back rule, where suddenly some things are called as pushes and some things aren't. And I know that Melksham used his hip rather than his hands, but there's a difference between protecting your space and just shunting a player out of the way. And to me, we're seeing more and more of that.
I compare these two, Duff. We say when you go down the beach that there's more sharks than we've ever seen before. No, there's sharks have always been there, but we're just looking for them now. This is the same with this push in the back or this pushing in the contest thing. Happens all the time. And it was a way of, getting your opponent away. Whether it's intentional to shove them into somebody else, not really sure. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it happens all the time. We're just really looking at it a lot now because of there's been some consequences to those pushes. I thought Melcham's a hip and shoulder that you do in most one-on-one contests when you're side by side. I'd be disappointed. I think McGovern's obviously unlucky, but I don't think there's any intent from Jake Melcham to say, right, I'm going to get this bloke concussed right now. I'm going to cause him some physical injury. I think he's trying to get McGovern off him so he could take the mark. So I think they've pulled the right rein on that one, the MRO finally. But again, this is the problem that we have, Duff. You and I tomorrow would have been debating and talking, if he did get a week, that we wouldn't have been surprised, because that's the lottery of the MRO, and that's like what's suspendable and what's not nowadays. I think that was fair. I think it was okay.
I agree with the debate and the lottery. I guess my point is that, and you're right, there was no intent, but there really is in footy, Scotty. Some guys that show no intent are getting suspended. Like Beau Allen gets a week. I think he should have got a week because he takes his eyes off the ball and still clips Jack Viney high. But, you know, Rory Lobb hits Mason Cox in the head and doesn't get a week, you know, and Rory Lobb made far sweeter contact with Mason Cox's cheekbone than Beau made in his glancing blow with Jack Viney's the side of his head.
That's still the greatest escape of the year so far, Rory Lobb's one. He just punched him in the face. And nothing to see here. Now, Rory Lobb hasn't thrown a punch in anger in his entire career.
Correct.
But he punched him in the face. And that to me is just staggering. And Beau Allen, no doubt about it, you could just see the remorse on the young fella's face immediately, couldn't you? He was gutted. But he did the wrong thing. He technically did the wrong thing, and it was pretty clear. If it was anyone else, they'd probably stay down a little bit longer. But Jack Viney, he's as hard as a cat's head, that bloke, and he was always getting up. So I think Beau's one is fair. I think he deserves a week for that. But the Jake Melcham one, I could understand both points of view from this, but it's because we've been trained now by the MRO that if someone gets hurt, they get a week for it, or they get 2 weeks for it, or they get 3 weeks for it. And that's what starts the argument. I think if you asked anyone that question 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, maybe even last year, people were saying it was just a bump in a marking contest. Don't be ridiculous. So it's just hard, mate. It's hard to discuss and decide what's fair and what's not when the MRO don't actually know what's right and wrong.
Okay, the key question for West Coast fans this week, they probably have to beat Richmond to not win the wooden spoon. Can they beat Richmond this week?
Well, I don't think there's an argument for them. I don't think you can find an argument for them. Richmond have a dip, and they were outgunned again on the weekend. If West Coast can stay with them for 3 quarters, and yet they can, because Richmond have sort of lost that ability to know how to win as well. But they're a lot more defensively sound than West Coast are. Minnie's obviously going to know the playing list. Well, this is, mind you, they've put about 6 or 7 new players in that he doesn't know, but he knows the strengths of 2/3 of the side that's there, so that's always handy. But I just think that Richmond have got a defensive structure that outweighs West Coast at the moment, and a willingness to perform that defensive structure, the willingness to set up your defensive zone, the willingness to chase, the willingness to tackle, willingness to fight. I think theirs is probably better than West Coast at the moment. But in saying that, who knows, mate? When you've got such young teams like Richmond's, it only takes a couple of people to have off days or to not feel 100%, to be a little bit off, that you can perform an upset. But if it was here, it might be a little bit different. But I think over there, I'm not sure I can find an argument for West Coast at the moment.
Tend to agree with you, Scott. Thanks for your thoughts this morning, mate. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Look forward to having more discussions and debates with you tomorrow morning.
I'll see you then, mate. Bye-bye.
Scotty Cummings, man of the people, great commentator, and, of course, co-host of Scotty and Goss for Brekkie. He'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And we'll be back straight after the news.